All right, everybody. This is creating a custom events web part with React and SharePoint Framework. My name is Hugo Bernier, and I am presenting a solution that Joao Mendes built. So if you like it, I get all the credits. If you don't like it, then you can blame him. I'm just kidding. Every solution that Joao does is always fantastic. And you'll see this is definitely one of those fantastic solutions. All right, so before I do my demo, I thought I'd show you how Joao configured his, because he took the time to actually put pictures and fancy stuff like that. But this is the web part, the events web part, that has the ability to select a date range, to pick events from all over the place. And it adds a little bit more style to the events than the regular out-of-the-box events web part. You can see you can create kind of beautiful renderings, as well as on the side here, you can actually do kind of a narrow version of the solution as well. So very cool, but let's actually show you how it works on my side. So I have installed it on my machine, on my tenant. And so this is the web part in action. Now, I didn't upload any pictures or anything like that. I just wanted to focus on the content itself. If I go and show you behind the scenes what I got, I've got a fancy calendar that I created, which is just a list where I put the required fields, things like category, all day, and things like that. And then I created some events in there. I also have some group calendars that I created. So I have a sewing club, a baking club, and a training. Don't ask me where I came up with those ideas for events. This is what I came up with. And then, so when I go back now to this web part and I show you how it is configured, you'll see how we're able to bring everything in. The first thing, let's go to edit, and then let's go select the web part itself. Go configure it. All right, so now you can see this is the events feed property pane, which has a lot of really fancy controls. The first thing we can do, obviously, is to set up the title for the events. So we'll call it upcoming events. If I can type, there you go. So I got my grid here. Got my list format, which renders everything in a nice, pretty list, which is easy to read. As well as, if I go right here to the film strip, I have a nice film strip view, which, let me see, yeah. So it's going to be hard to drag the scroll bar because I'm in edit mode and I'm too lazy to republish here. But let's just move to the marquee. I like the marquee. It just shows a continuous scroll. Might not be the best for people with accessibility needs, but it's certainly a way to keep people informed of what's going on. That would be good for a display or something like that. Same thing with the carousel, right? The carousel is a great way to render information. Maybe that rotates by itself, but here, let me just show you how I can just kind of scroll it manually myself, move it around. There you go. There's also a feature event where you can actually show the featured events, you know, one big one kind of thing. And it's very similar to the hero web part. We also have a fancy masonry. If you're not familiar with masonry, it's basically this layout that looks like bricks on a wall. And it allows you to have different heights and different things like that, and it'll just kind of flow the events. It's a very engaging way to actually get people to see these events. And then if you want to move events to the side, or maybe for more mobile friendly view, you have the compact list as well. Now there's a lot more stuff that we can do with this. So let's go take a look at. So first thing is we can control the height of the web part, either in pixels, in a percent, and view height. as well as custom. So you can actually create calculated views, and that allows you to fully control the layout of the page. We allow drag and drop. I'm gonna try to demo this to you. So you can't drag and drop the actual web part itself. You have to drag and drop through that little grab handle. And there you go. In edit mode, it doesn't work so well. You have to publish the web part. But you can see the concept here. All right, so let's go at the bottom here. Let's actually go to some of the things that we can configure with this web part. So for example, we can configure how many events we want to show, whether we, there you go. So let's click and reduce the number of events. And that's a great way to make sure that we're not overwhelming our users with too much information on the page. That's my favorite layout. We can also control how many headline lines that we have. So in case we want to just auto clip the information that's coming back, make it easier to read and align everything, you can fully control that because, of course, that's a Joao web part. All these features are there. Same thing with descriptions. And in fact, you can control whether you want to show descriptions or not, whether you want to show metadata or not. As you can see, the time and date disappears. Whether you want to show location, I don't have locations in any of my events, so that's not going to make a difference, as well as organizers. And then the date filter at the top there, so we can control whether we want to be able to show that date filter or not. I'll leave it on because I need it for my demo shortly. And now I have my list of data sources. And the cool thing about that is that I can go pick any calendars basically that are on a site or that are, as you saw, a list or a group calendar that I have access to. So all I need to do here is to start typing. And eventually, if I type properly here, we should start seeing the, come on, training. There you go. All right, so I picked a training calendar here, my fancy training calendar, and now I can show these events. And once it's in publish mode, you can see that I can actually control things like, well, I want events for this week, which I don't have any events for this week, the next 2 weeks, this month, this quarter, which is the same thing in this case. And then I can select the time range. So let me just pick something that's far away so you can see some cool events here. Yeah, December 1st, there we go. And now I have new events that show up. So this is a very fancy web part, obviously, that has a lot of capability. Let's kind of focus on the code now. So the first thing that we need to look at is the events feed web part itself. The web part itself, one of the things that Joao does is he does a safe initialize. And what's a safe initialize? Well, you know, we can use property panes to configure properties of a web part. But when we drop the web part in the first place, we don't necessarily have control over how these events are configured. Now you can always set up default properties in the manifest, but another thing that you can do is to make sure that when your code initializes on init, you can actually go configure default values. And so, for example, here I can configure, or Joao configures the property title. We could have localized that. He configures a layout to be the agenda, and he does all these properties so to make sure the web part does not crash when it renders, no matter what. And then all the way at the end here, we can control whether we want to show filters. Then we inject the context. So if Teams is currently, or the context of Teams is currently on, that means we're running in Teams. And then we can actually say that the host type is Teams. And then we have our universal context, which allows us to actually adapt, basically take the context, the SharePoint context, and feed it into the events feed web part without having to feed in all the garbage data that we have in the context, just the necessary information. And don't forget, if you ever update an init on init event, don't forget to call the kind of parents or the base class on init. Otherwise, your web part is not going to be so happy. Now, all the fancy property pane controls that we saw, that gets rendered in the get property pane configuration. And what it does is it returns an iProperty pane configuration. And so we can actually play with that. One of the things that we're able to do is we're able to build kind of all sorts of logic, like, is this a marquee? Is this a contact list? Is it draggable layout? And if it is, then let's actually start populating the property fields depending on whether that mode is selected. So what we do is we build an array of property pane fields, and then we populate it. So for example, we put the things that will always appear, like the title, the layout, and so on. But then we add additional conditional event things. Like, for example, is it a marquee? If so, then push a property pane marquee direction, which is a custom property pane field that we have. And if you look at the code that that is available, Joao has about a bazillion property pane fields that are all customizable. It's a great study. If you want to see how to create really cool custom property pane fields, you can definitely look at the sample that Joao provided. Let's zoom in so we can see all these fancy events or fancy things. All right, so one of the things that Joao does from a data orchestration perspective in the event feed web part root is he's got everything simplified under use event management, and all the event management happens behind the scene. One of the cool features that we do is we actually have do fetch ref, and that's to fetch all the reference information to all the events. But then we do a promise all. So that means that it doesn't matter how many things we have going in that, how many calendars we have or things like that, we're able to make all the requests at the same time and then wait for all those requests to happen. So this is what we do here. We say, find me all the select calendars and find me all the events. And then for each event, kind of map them to a list of events that I can render. In the data orchestration, we also have a use polling hook, which allows us to actually control how often we want to refresh the events. That's one thing I didn't get to show you, is that when I change the events behind the scene, the web part updates automatically. I don't have to refresh it myself. Under, excuse me, data orchestration, one of the things that we do that, it's why we love Joao's samples so much. When the web part is loading or the data is loading, he's actually rendering a skeleton layout. So a temporary layout of the format or the layout that is selected. So for example, if we've got a list or a compact list, Joao renders an event feed list skeleton, which will just show those gray squares that are shimmering. So it looks like the data is almost there, even though he hasn't received the data yet. And he does that for film strip, carousels, and so on and so forth. He's got a whole bunch of skeleton for every type of rendering, so that the experience from the user's perspective is great, right? They don't see please wait. They actually see something that is rendering dynamically. Now, the filter events.tsx, this is where the date filtering and time zone mapping is happening. One of the things I wanted to show you is how Joao is using a whole bunch of controls, drop-down fields, like the stack, and so on and so forth, but it's coming from the SPTech React Controls v2. That's Joao's baby, where he's got all these React controls that are built especially for beautiful web parts. So for example, all the newsfeed rendering, the grid, the news card for every event, news trending feed, all that stuff is coming from that library, and you can use it yourself. And last little bit is how we compute the date range, right? We do that on the client based on, for example, what event range did we select, and then we calculate locally based on the user's time zone and everything, how to find the events. So we do that for this week, next 2 weeks, and so on and so forth. All right, that's all the time I have. But if you want to go see the source code, the URL is available right here. And please go take a look at Joao's React controls, reactcontrols.sptechapp.com. They're fantastic, and I think you will love them as much as I do.